Kvoid Morad Asra Shlita, and maybe in the context, I would add, and a very, very chashuv Rebbitzin, so sein gesund und stark. Kvoid Rosh HaYeshiva, the truth is that I'm a kohen. So a kohen speaks first. As I state in the Gemara, Paiseach Rishon, and that's what Rashi says in Gittin, and the Rosh says in Nedarim. On the other hand, you have the Rosh Yeshiva. So I should speak after the Rosh Yeshiva. So my high. So apparently we're going through a historical development over here, as was so finely delineated just a moment ago, and surely at the beginning. I came late. I wanted very much to hear everything that Reb Alter said, but we got stuck because the Brooklyn Bridge was closed. That's the price you pay for not living on the Lower East Side. Rabbi say, I don't know, honestly, I don't know at what point acquaintance becomes friendship, and I don't know at what point friendship becomes love. But that is my journey with your Morad Asra. It is a journey from acquaintanceship to friendship, and from friendship to genuine and absolute, unmitigated love, which I know is mutual. And as much as the Rav was excited, I was even more excited for the opportunity. The emerson is, I was afraid that what I was going to say was completely my own. Because Ava Mekalkela says Hashura. But I was asked specifically to use the words of the Rav. So that's what I'm going to do. But, you know, the Rav Zayda, Reb Chaim Brisker, was very loath to give drushes, especially Shabbos Shuvah drushes. He felt very uncomfortable. I heard this from our Rav many, many times. But he had to, because it was in his contract in Brisk. So he would get up and he would say, Chaim Retze Chaim. And if you're listening, you're listening. But Chaim Retze Chaim. In this vein, so to speak, to use that as an analogy, I'm using the Rav's words. I'm speaking about halachic man. I'm going to give you the words of the Rav in one of his very great drushes, that every Jew is compared to a Sefer Torah. But the truth is that even though they are the words of the Rav, but really, Aaron Retzer Reb Shaya. This is the way I feel, and it is in that sense that I am quoting the Rav. In the Isha Halacha, the Rav, and I won't labor you with the very compelling but also difficult Hebrew, I'm going to read to you a small portion here and there in translation. But the Rav spoke about what it means to be a man of halacha. And of course, in his incredible greatness, he covers the gamut of the human experience and compares the Isha Halacha to every other type of person, including religious man, because religious man is not Isha Halacha. Included in this are certain subtleties, certain nuances, which you will all recognize in your Rav, because he truly is himself an embodiment of that Isha Halacha that the Rav was speaking about. In fact, there are 3 stories that the Rav brings in an essay that is not replete with stories. But he felt that they were very important to make the point that he was making. The first point is that a Rav is not afraid of anyone, except for the Rebbeinu Shalom, of course. The lo saguru mipnei ish. It's not easy for a Rav who is extraordinarily humble, because that is also one of the requirements, and a Rav who is given his remuneration from the Kehillah, and so he is, to some extent, obligated to them. And the Rav is a servant. Avdus ani noisen lochem, not srora. It's not easy for someone to have the mantle of lois saguru mipnei ish, to have that image of the great Dayan and Paisik who has no concern for public opinion, or is not afraid to state his view. And the imagery here is best described by stories. So this is the way the Rav presented it. Once Reb Chaim of Brisk was attending a conference of outstanding Talmidei Chachamim in St. Petersburg. The item on the agenda was the question of uncircumcised babies. And the issue is, should their names be entered on the official register of the Jewish community? Now you understand that the uncircumcised babies were not circumcised for a reason. So obviously that went into their thinking. And in parentheses, in fact, through this tactic they hoped to compel the assimilationists to circumcise their sons. So they had good kavanos. They really wanted that the circumcision should be forced upon the assimilationists by virtue of the fact that otherwise they would not be registered, with all the attendant consequences, whatever they were. Reb Chaim arose and said, Rabbi, please show me the halacha which states that one who is not circumcised is not a member of the Jewish people. I am aware that a person who is not circumcised may not partake of karbonos, but I am not aware that he is devoid of the holiness belonging to the Jewish people. To be sure, if he comes of age and does not circumcise himself, he is liable to kares. However, he who eats blood and who violates the Shabbos are also liable to kares. Why then do you treat the uncircumcised infant so stringently and the Shabbos violator so leniently? On the contrary, this infant hasn't sinned at all yet, except that his father has not fulfilled the obligation. The Rav continued, and he said, from a political and practical perspective, and as an emergency measure even, no doubt the majority was correct. However, on the basis of the pure halacha, Reb Chaim was correct, and he would not sacrifice this halachic truth even for the sake of realizing the noblest of ideals. He then quotes a story of Reb Chaim. It's not an episode. It's not like the previous story. Instead, it reveals Reb Chaim's thinking about what it is that makes a Rav a Rav. What's a Rav all about? So he says, my uncle Reb Meir Berlin told me that once Reb Chaim of Brisk was asked what the function of a rabbi is. Reb Chaim replied, to redress the grievances of those who are abandoned and alone, to protect the dignity of the poor, and to save the oppressed from the hands of his oppressors. The way I heard the story, Reb Chaim gathered his children round, and his Talmidim, and he asked them, what do you think is the tafkid of a Rav? And one of them said, to paskin shailas. The other one said, to teach Torah, and so on. And he said, none of you are right. These are ancillary responsibilities. The tafkid of a Rav is lahatzel oshuk miyad oishkai, to protect the poor and the miserable and the lonely, the almonis and the yisaimim. And everybody knows that in Brisk, a desperate mother who knew that she would not be able to take care of a child who was most likely born out of wedlock and in very seedy circumstances, would deposit the child in the front doorstep of Reb Chaim Brisker. There's a Maisa that the Rav relates at the very end of this section. It's a famous Maisa. The Maisa is about the burial society, the Chevra Kadisha. He writes, the Rav writes, the halacha, the Yiddishkeit that's faithful to itself. I only changed the English translation. There it says Judaism. I like Yiddishkeit, but I'm reading from the paper. The Yiddishkeit that is faithful to itself, however, which brings the Shekhinah into, here it says divine providence, it's okay, into the midst of empirical reality, does not center about the synagogue or study house. These are minor sanctuaries. The true sanctuary is the sphere of our daily mundane activities, for it is there that the realization of the halacha takes place. The great Torah giants, the Gedolei Yisrael, the halachic men par excellence, were indeed champions of truth and justice. They glowed with a resplendent ethical beauty. Space does not permit me even to begin to speak, for example, about Reb Chaim's unrelenting efforts to realize the ideals of righteousness and equity. Let me merely cite one incident wherewith to conclude this section of the essay, Ish HaHalacha. Once 2 Jews died in Brisk on the same day. They were nifter on the same day. In the morning, a poor shoemaker who had lived out his life in obscurity died. While about noontime, a few hours later, a wealthy, prominent member of the community passed away. According to the halacha, in such a case, the one who dies first must be buried first. No, the members of the burial society, who had received a handsome sum from the heirs of the rich man, decided to attend to him first, despite the fact that he had died later. For who was there to plead the cause of the poor man? Who would know and who would care? When Reb Chaim was informed about the incident, he sent a messenger of the court to warn the members of the burial society to desist from their disgraceful behavior. The members of the burial society, however, refused to heed the directive of Reb Chaim. Of course, that could never happen in this Kehillah, but in Brisk it happened. Refused to heed the directive of Reb Chaim and began to make the arrangements for the burial of the rich man. Reb Chaim then arose himself, took his walking stick, trudged over to the house of the deceased, and chased all the attendants outside of the house of the rich man, where they were making the hachonas for his kvura first. Reb Chaim prevailed. The poor man was buried before the rich man. Reb Chaim's enemies multiplied and increased. Again, that could not possibly happen in this shul. And truly so. But it emphasizes something about your Rav, that for 50 years, the one single guiding principle was the emes of the Torah and the emes of the halacha. And I have witnessed it just on occasion. But you who were in the Kehillah, and many of you for many, many years, Baruch Hashem, together with your very wonderful Rav and Rebbitzin, you were able to see this perhaps even on a weekly basis. And this is not Poshet, Rabbi say. If Reb Chaim Brisker, the Ga'oin HaGa'oinim, whom the Rav spoke about over and over and over again, about the greatness of his Torah and how he brought a derech of learning which maybe saved Torah for Iyun, by giving them that enthusiasm and that excitement in learning, which again your Morad Asra was so eager to convey to others, and brought the light of that incredible Avas HaTorah and Simchas HaTorah to thousands of Talmidim, and Talmidim who many of whom never knew what Torah was. The synonymous JSS with Reb Shaya Siff soll sein gesund und stark. It's a synonym. And from there came Talmidei Chachomim, Yirei Shamayim, was a Gewalt. Halavai, we should have that duplicate today. I don't know why you retired. Why did you leave us? Aber lemaise Rabbi say, You're talking about a Reb Chaim Brisker's derech, Reb Chaim Brisker's derech, Reb Chaim Brisker's derech, and all of a sudden, what does the Rav see in Reb Chaim Brisker? The Avi Yisaimim. He sees the Rav who takes in the babies. He captures the essence of Reb Chaim as Reb Chaim speaks about what a Rav should be. And then he gives you these vignettes which prove the loisaguru mipnei ish, and the concern for the poor, the concern for the person who has no one to care for him but the Rav. In the essay that describes how a person is compared to a Sefer Torah, I have to tell you, I read this essay originally in its Yiddish. Reb Hillel Zeidman, Zechrono Livrocha, Dr. Zeidman, wrote it up, and it's such a magnificent piece. One of our Chavri HaKollel in the Kollel Elyon, when I was the Rosh Kollel at the time, Reb Elchanan Adler, soll sein gesund, was now one of our Rosh Yeshiva, he decided that it would be kedai to present both the Yiddish and his translation into Lashon Kodesh of that drasha. It is an absolutely magnificent drasha, replete with references from all of Shas, and it's an incredible tour de force. It is the Rav in his crowning glory. In several of the Nekudos, I saw not a Yid is like a Sefer Torah, but Reb Shaya is like a Sefer Torah. And I'd just like to share with you again 3 of those nuggets, 3 of those points. The Rav says that in the Gemara Brachos Daf Samach Gimel Amud Beis, very famous Gemara, they gathered in Kerem B'Yavne, and Rebbe Lezer ben Noishel Reb Yossi HaGlili started to speak B'Kvod Achsanya in honor of his host, V'Dorash. Vayevorech Hashem es Oved Edom Hagiti Ba'avor Aron Hashem. The pasuk tells us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, his Aron was planted in the house of Oved Edom. He's called Oved Edom from Gas, but he was a Jew. And this fellow took the Sefer Torah in, even though this was an awesome responsibility. And there was a fear that would happen before Peretz Uzzah was going to happen again. And on the contrary, HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed by showering Oved Edom with kindness, Bercho bebonim ubebanos, he showered him with kindness for keeping the Aron, and people realized that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was happy with that achsanya. Said Rebbe Lezer b'noi shel Rebbe Yossi HaGlili, v'haloi dvarim kal v'chomer. That's the Gemara in Brachos. Haloi dvarim kal v'chomer. Ma Aron shaloi achal v'shasa. It just occupied a space. Elo, so what did he do? Ki beit v'ribeitz lefanov. He cleaned the area. He made sure that everything was smooth. He took away the cobwebs. Kach, the Rebbeinu Shalom gives such bracha. Hama'areach talmid chacham b'seich beisai. A person who brings a talmid chacham into his house. Uma'achilu umashkeyu uma'aneu min nechosav al achas kama v'kama. Question is obvious. A person brings a Talmud Chacham into his house, and he takes care of him, but he's just a Talmud Chacham. You're talking about the Aron which had the Luchais, the real Aron. The Aron from the Mikdash, the Aron that was meant to come into the Mikdash. You're talking about the Aron, and you make a Kal V'chomer from the Aron to a Talmud Chacham. You see here that they understood that the Kavod and the Achsanya and the Achila and Shesiyah that they give to a Talmud Chacham is a Kal V'chomer level above hosting the Aron, because the Aron doesn't need that much. But what about the fact that it's an Aron? Because the person is also an Aron, and a person is also a Sefer Torah. This was the conclusion of the Rav. And I have to tell you, when I thought about this Gemara, I thought about a reciprocity here in this wonderful young Israel, which is 50 years of mutual respect and mutual ava and mutual care, where each recognizes the milas of the other and each provides the achsanya for the other. The young Israel provides an achsanya for the Rav to teach and to give of himself. And the Rav provides an achsanya in his heart for every single member of the Kehillah. And again, I say the Rav and the Rebbitzin. Sollen sie sein gesund und stark. In the Gemara, Maseches Yuma Daf Ayin Beis Omid Beis, says the Rav, we see Amar Rabbi Yochanan Shloisha Zeirim Heim, there are 3 crowns. There were 3 crowns in the construction of the Mishkan. There were 3 crown structures, Zer Zohav Sofif. What are they? Shel Nizbeach, V'shel Aroin, V'shel Shulchan. Shel Nizbeach, Zocha Aroin V'notloi. This, of course, refers to the Kahuna. Shel Shulchan, Zocha David V'notloi. Shulchan represents Malchus, represents Ashirus, represents authority. Shel Aroin, what about the Zer of the Aron? Adayin Munachu. Kol haroitze likach, yavoi v'yikach. This Chazal of Shloisha Zeirim is replicated essentially in principle in the Rambam at the beginning of the 3rd parak of Hilchos Talmud Torah, as you probably know. Shloisha Ksarim Heim. Keser Torah, Keser Kuna, Keser Malchus. Keser Torah is available for everybody. But then the Gemara says, Mi bayis u'michutz titzapenu, Mi bayis u'michutz titzapenu, that the Aron was Mi bayis u'michutz, Amar Rava, Kol Talmid Chacham she'ein toichai kebaroi einoi Talmid Chacham. What's the connection? So you could say it's a beautiful homily, but it's mashma from here that it's to be taken quite literally. If you want to know a person whose essence is exactly what appears on the outside, there are no frills, there's no baloney, there's no masquerade. You know, they tell a maisa, just goes, I'm trying to explain, I don't mean a masquerade, a fraud. I'm talking about something else. They tell a maisa that the Satmar Rav, Zechrono Livrocha, was once treated to a delightful performance by a chassid of his, who on Purim dressed up to such perfection as the Rebbe and spoke with the accents of the Rebbe in his language that you couldn't tell the two apart. And when he came to perform for the Rebbe started to cry. So he felt terrible. He had no intention of hurting the Rebbe's feelings. He had no intention of mocking the Rebbe. It was Purim, and he thought it was just a wonderful thing. So he started apologizing profusely to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, Nein, nicht das. So then what? He said, Ich wein, I cry. Wieviel Mal durch ein Jahr mach ich noch dem Satmar Rebbe? How many times during the year do I imitate the Satmar Rav? That's an unbelievable thing. You're put on a pedestal, you're the Rav. You're the Rav. The Rav is the Rav. And you expect things from the Rav. You expect certain behavior from the Rav. You expect certain orientations, attitudes, the words that come out of his mouth. You might even expect a long Shemona Esrei. You know, I used to be in the car, Reb Shaya, that's when maybe that's when the friendship started to become a little love. By my Akara Satoiv, I used to be able to go together to the yeshiva. And inevitably, he would finish off with the end of the davening, the Shir Shal Yom, whatever it was, in the car. You know why? Because the Shemona Esrei was just so long. Now, you know, they once came over to the Malbim, so the story goes. I wasn't there. But the story goes that they came over to the Malbim when he got his Rabbonis, and they said to him, you know, it's not good for a Rav. By the way, Reb Chaim Brisker's Shemona Esrei was lightning fast. He said, you know, the Yetzer Hara can't catch me. But they said to the Malbim, you know, it's not right that the Rav should daven such a short Shemona Esrei. So he says, so what should I do? I mean, that's the way the Rav talks. So what should I do? So he said, pause by Moedim. They don't know. When you say Moedim, they know where you're up to. But if you stop before Moedim, they don't know. So pause. He says, I did that already. But here you had a Shemona Esrei that on the regular, typical Yom Shlishi Baboiker, inconsequential, nothing special, no yontif, no tainis, nothing. It was a long Shemona Esrei. But that was Rav Shaya. That is Toichai Kebari. I don't recall ever, and I wish I could, I dream about reaching such a madrega myself. Because no matter what, there's an aura, and you have to live up to the aura, and there's not a lot of make-believe, but on the edges, there's a shtickle make-believe. But you have here a Rav that is mamish toichai kebari. That is such a rarity, bizman hazeh. And it's so special. And you know something else? There's a price you pay for that. Because exaggeration is always reduced by the person anyhow. There's a famous Taz about his spadim, but we won't go into it. But a person exaggerates so that the other person, when he tells over the story, should just say it the way it is. Because nobody likes to give people all the credit that they're due. It's the human nature, unfortunately. So when it's exaggerated a little bit, when a Rav acts a little bit more than he really is, maybe they'll chap who the Rav is. So there's a price you pay when you don't exaggerate, when it's tochel kebaro mamish, when the inside and the outside match to perfection. You know why? Because the Rav is a Sefer Torah. The Rav is an Aron that houses a Sefer Torah. And finally, there's a very famous Gemara in Maseches Makkos. Gemara in Daf Chav Beis Amud Beis. Amar Rava kama tipshoi sha'ar inshi. Interesting, sha'ar means, no, I wasn't talking about present company. I think the word sha'ar is present company excluded. How foolish people are. Sha'ar inshi. The kaimi mikami Sefer Torah. They stand whenever a Sefer Torah walk passes by, as the halacha dictates, of course. They stand. V'loi kaimi mikami kavra rabba. But they don't stand when a Talmud Chacham passes by. The ilu b'Sefer Torah ksiv arboim, and this is incredible. That's what's doing in Maseches Makkos, by the way, because in the Sefer Torah it says arboim yakenu. Correct? How many lashes? 40 lashes. V'osu rabbonon ubatzru choda, and the Chachamim came along and Pashup Pshat with their incredible power and with the authority that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave to them. And let's extend the idea a little bit, and therefore they are the embodiment of the Torah's, not just the Torah's interpretation, but the extension of the Torah itself, therefore. They are able to tell you the Pshat of the Torah, without which you are lost. Ubatzu choda. So he writes, Chashivuso shel gavra rabba oimedes me'al lezu shel Sefer Torah. I would like to add something. This little bit is of my own. When they said that the Torah says 40, and the Chachamim came along and made it 39, there's no question that the Pashup Pshat is what it is. The Chachamim understood that when the Torah says 40, it means 39. But al pidrush only. The reason you stand up for a Talmud Chacham is because he knows, and this was mentioned earlier, he knows how to make his Torah into a compassionate Torah. Here you have a person that deserves lashes. He's far from a tzaddik. And there's such a preoccupation with lo Yosef pen Yosef. Certainly the way the Rambam teaches up this halacha. You have a batzru choda. There's the mitigation that's in the heart. Can't always be, because you follow the halacha and you interpret the Torah with emes. But there's always the tachbulos and the efforts and the extraordinary leilos kayomim. You know how the heter agunos of Gedolei Olam was with such a compassion for that aguna that they turned the Torah upside down and inside out. Never veered from the emes, never veered from the truth of the Torah, even one iota. They never said something that could not be just to be matir her. But you know, you struggle and you learn the sugya over and over and over when they know the sugya cold to begin with. And why? Maybe I can find that knetch, that nakuda that I didn't understand before. Maybe I can relate the circumstances to something so that finally I can find some tzad heter. This is the batzru choda that the Talmid Chacham brings to a Torah. And that is why it's absurd not to stand up for the Talmid Chacham when we stand up for the Sefer Torah. You know, when you're with somebody for so many years, you could begin to think that he's your father, he's your brother, he's your son, whatever the level, whatever age you are. And sometimes we cannot forget that he is the Rav. And he is a major Talmid Chacham. And for that alone, the awe and the concern, and of course he's going to say, you know, make with his hand like this. Da wissen who you're dealing with, and what you have in your midst, and what the Gemara is trying to tell you. Rabbi say, I had an idea, and this also in this piece, incredible piece, that a Rav is like a Sefer Torah, but it really depends on how much time I have. I had an idea. David HaMelech, did he build the Beis HaMikdash? No. Every child knows that. Habayis asher bana Shlomo. And Shlomo HaMelech built the Beis HaMikdash. Who builds a shul? Are you talking about the pews? You're talking about the Aron Kodesh? Talking about the various renovations, the various transmutations of a place? The answer is the Kehillah, the Presidium, the fundraisers. And they work hard, and they work be'amunah, the good ones, Baruch Hashem. And they really, really care, and they give of themselves, and especially of their time, and very often of their funds, of their means, and sometimes beyond their means. And someone would ask, who builds the shul? The answer is, and that all of you should forgive me, the Rav. The Rav builds the shul. Here, Rav Soloveitchik, Zechonu Livracha, tells us about what David HaMelech's contribution was in very sophisticated terms. And it's too much for now. But when it speaks about the Kiddush of the Ritzpah, the Gemara is very busy that the Kiddush of Shlomo depended on the Kiddush of David. And who was the individual focus for Klal Yisrael to gather together and commit themselves to build the Beis HaMikdash? You know, we have a pasuk that we mention every day in Uval Tzion Goyal. Hashem Elokei Avram Yitzchak V'Yisrael says, Shamra Zeis Li Olam Liyetzer Machshavos Levav Amecha V'Hochein Levav Amelecha. You know where that comes from? David HaMelech was speaking and blessing the people who had come together with such unity, with such ava for this incredible project, which was not going to be built by David. Achato lo yisivna abayis. Ki im bincha hayoytze mechalotzecha. But David HaMelech created that spirit, that mood, that aura, that commitment. And you know what David HaMelech said? David HaMelech said, Halavai. Halavai. The enthusiasm, the excitement, the ke'ish echad b'leiv echad should be with them forever the way it is at this moment. And of course, even though David HaMelech did not actually build the Mikdash, but that spirit was responsible for Shlomo HaMelech's Mikdash. And therefore, David is given the credit. The Rav, in every aspect of his gadlus and his concern for his kehillah, and his Avas Yisrael in general, which was nurtured from so many different angles to perfection, is the architect of everything that happened in these 50 years. Because he created the Achdus, and he created the spirit, and he created the understanding, and he taught the Torah, and he gave and gave and gave. Until finally, young Israel's history is rich with Talmidei Chachomim and Yirei Shamayim and Oiskim B'tzarchei Tzibur and people involved in Hatzolah, and who knows what else. It has a tremendous track record. And this is because of that David HaMelech that stood before Shlomo to create the spirit and the Achdus of the place. Rabbi say, there's one more Gemara. And this is, if you will, a poem to the Rebbitzin. I don't mean that I'm going to tell you a poem in rhyme. I mean the Gemara sings to us. Yeah, and it sings because of a kasha to Teretz. There's a Gemara that everybody knows also. The Gemara is in Daf Kuf Yud Tes, and the remes to the Gemara in the beginning of Perek Hayish Mekadesh. It's good to do things yourself in preparation, even if you have many servants, in preparation for Shabbos, right? So the Gemara gives examples. And amongst the examples, Rava Molach Shibuta, Rav Huna Madlik Shraga, Rav Papa Gadal Pesila. Just a moment. Everybody should jump up. What do you mean, Rav Huna Madlik Shraga? Who lights the candles? Shabbos. The Shabbos candles, the Erev Shabbos, who lights them? The man or the woman? The husband or the wife? No. What does it mean that he was Madlik Shraga? So where was she? The Imre Emes in his Agois on the Mishnayos points to Rabbi Kiva Eger. Kiva Eger in the Gilyon and the Mishnayos and the Avchav Beis in Shabbos. They end up quoting a Marshal, which is also a Tikkunei Zayar. It kind of also brings everything together from the different Mekairos. The Marshal says as follows: Rav Huna Madlik Shraga. I found the pshat in Tosfos. V'ayu sham harbe neiros v'aysa ishtoi madlekes acheres. He lit and she lit. He doesn't like that pshat. V'ani oimer de yochel liyos. Shehu hidlik tchila kedei sheishtoi tia madlekes ner shel mitzvah. V'kal lahavin. So what the Gemara means by Madlik Shraga, how do you prepare the wick and the candle? You first light it, and then you put it out. And now it's very easy to light. Whose job is it to do that? The husband. So that's what it means, Madlik Shraga, and he put it out so that his wife should be able to light it. I had this incredible feeling. That sense of achdus that this Gemara speaks, bein ish le'ishtay, of a Rav and a Rebbitzin who were together and had such a tremendous hashpah, was not each in her own way. It's not the first pshat of the Marsha. It's not I'm in this corner and I'm in that corner with davening. No. It's a unity of purpose. It's a common goal, a common incentive, a sense that if we work together, we can build a gvaldike kehillah and we can make nefashos. And it's my feeling that whether it was JSS or in the summertime in this incredible place where they mamish created nefashos and made them avodim ne'emanim to Hashem v'Torasei, unbelievable madregas of genuine avas haTorah and Yirei Shamayim. The Chayim sheyesh banu coming to life was an agenda that could only have been possible if there was a common nair which both worked together for. And there were times, perhaps, that the beginning was the one and the conclusion was the other, and vice versa. But the ikar is, it wasn't nair acheres. It was that nair. And I wish from the bottom of my heart. You know what the Gemara says? The Gemara says, Harogil b'ner. What is the Gemara saying by Mem Adlikin? So the Gemara says, Harogil b'ner, they have great children. The chinuch was of the shul. The chinuch was the JSS boys. The chinuch was the camp boys. But the chinuch was the children and the grandchildren. Children who are immersed in chinuch in every possible way. Children who understood the lesson and the message. You know, it can go either way. You can be a Rav and a Rebbitzin and have children who despise the Rabbanus because they see what happened to the parents. It's happened over and over again, Rabbi say. But sometimes you see what should be, that there's this tremendous appreciation for the agenda, a tremendous desire to emulate, an unbelievable need to share in the tzarchei tzibur be'emunah, even when it's only HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yishalem Scharim. And the reward of that Rogel B'ner, which was shared together all these years, was a magnificent mishpacha. Unbelievable how the lesson permeated the walls of their home and the walls of the Beis Medrash, and how many were affected and inspired by it. I can only give my birchas kayim. Rabbi Alter said, in the name of the Baal Shem Tov, you know, when you give a bracha to a goy, I don't know, maybe that's a lot easier. A guy who breaks the ice. I'm giving a bracha to a tremendous Talmid Chacham, probably bigger Talmid Chacham than I am. So it's very hard. I mean, what do you give? What bracha do you give? But I have one advantage. Even the Baal Shem Tov didn't have that advantage. You know what that is? I'm a kayin, right? I give you the birchas kainim. Yivrechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, Hashem panav elecha v'yichoneka, Yisa Hashem panav elecha. V'yosim lecha shalom. The Ran Shalom should give you everything that is measured in all the chazals, in all of the mefarshim, on those psukim, and they should be yours. And you should have arichus yom v'shonim b'ne'imim, and you should be able to look back on these 50 years again, as this Hashem. And it should be zoicha, and this I finish exactly the same way as the great Rebbe Alter before me, to be mekadim, be mekabel pnei Mashiach tzidkenu together with Yeshes Chayil and your glorious mishpach and the wonderful Kehillah and all those who are gathered here. Mekabel pnei Mashiach tzidkenu v'karv b'mheira v'yameinu amen.
I see that I was remiss. Before, I had the opportunity to speak about the role of a tzibur and what our role should be vis-a-vis the Rav and Rebbitzin, and I spoke about bothering them and take advantage of them, and I hold by that message. If we don't, it's a chisaron in ourselves. We're missing an incredible opportunity. But I see now that I've missed another critical role